The cold emptiness beyond the dead moon had never changed. For hundreds of years, the small alien station drifted quietly at the edge of known space, its sensors watching the void for anything unusual. Most days, there was nothing, just silence, darkness, and the slow passing of stars. That was why the alarms were so shocking. Senior Watchmaster Ikor had been dozing in his command chair when the deck under him began to vibrate. A deep, rolling hum shook through the station as every console lit up with warning lights. The sound wasn't like anything the station had ever produced. It was low, heavy, and seemed to rattle inside his bones. He snapped upright, his frilled crest stiffening. "What is that?" he barked. The young sensor officer's blue skin had turned pale. "Sir, gravity waves, massive ones. They're bending our hull structure. I've never seen anything like it." Kor turned to the main screen. The starfield looked normal at first, but then he saw it. A shimmer like heat rising from metal, only this was in the middle of space. The distortion pulsed, and every time it did, the readings spiked higher. "That's not natural," Ikor muttered. The communications officer looked up, fear in her eyes. "Sir, the wave is moving toward us." Kor's claws tapped against the armrest. The council had warned that someday humans might appear in their territory. They had only recently discovered faster-than-light travel, and the first meeting was supposed to be calm, diplomatic, and carefully arranged in a safe, empty sector. The coordinates for the meeting had been set for years. But this, whatever was coming, was not part of the plan. The shimmering patch of space began to twist, folding in on itself like a piece of cloth being pulled through a small hole. The light around it bent at strange angles, as if reality itself was being stretched. Sensors screamed warnings. The crew gripped their consoles as the deck vibrated harder. Then, for one terrifying moment, everything went silent. The distortion collapsed into a single point. Kor's heart thudded in his chest. The point exploded, not with fire or debris, but with blinding white light that filled the viewscreens. The crew cried out, shielding their eyes. When the glare faded, something was there. Something impossibly huge. It was shaped like a dagger with its tip pointing toward them, its hull the color of midnight. No stars reflected from its surface. It seemed to drink the light around it. As Ikor's vision cleared, he realized the vessel was still moving forward, slow and steady, as if nothing in existence could stop it. "How big is it?" he demanded. The sensor officer's voice shook. 15 kilometers long, 3 kilometers wide. "Sir, that's larger than any warship in the Council's history." Kor's tail flicked nervously. The computer translated markings on the side of the ship. The letters glowed on his screen in the Council's common language. SS Resolute. The name meant nothing to him, but something about the way it sat there, bold and unafraid, sent a chill down his spine. "This ship is human," the communications officer said quietly. The bridge fell silent. The humans had arrived, but not in the small, harmless diplomatic craft the Council had imagined. The Resolute slowed to a halt, its massive engines glowing faintly. Along its flanks, dozens of smaller shapes emerged from hidden bays, escort ships, each as large as a Council battleship. They formed a loose ring around the mothership, moving with precise, effortless coordination. A chime rang from the comm console. "Incoming transmission, sir," the officer said. Kor's throat felt dry. "Put it through." The screen flickered, and a human appeared. He was broad-shouldered, his skin a shade Ikor had never seen before, and his dark eyes were sharp and alert. He wore a plain uniform, no medals or ornaments, but something in his posture made it clear. This was a commander. "Greetings," the human said in perfect Council standard. "I am Captain Elias Ward of the Terran Alliance vessel Resolute. We come in peace, seeking dialogue with the Galactic Council." His tone was calm, almost friendly, but there was weight behind his words, as if he didn't need to raise his voice to make himself understood. Ikor forced his tail to stay still. "Welcome to Council space, Captain Ward. Your arrival was unexpected." Ward's lips curved into a faint smile. Our first journey through folded space was not without its difficulties. I trust we're in the right place. You are, Ikor replied carefully. The captain's gaze shifted slightly, as if studying the crew. Ikor had the uncomfortable feeling that Ward was learning far more than he was saying. If it pleases you, Ward continued, I'd like to send a small diplomatic team to your station. We believe meeting face-to-face would help build trust. A small team. Ikor glanced at the massive shuttles floating alongside the Resolute. Any one of them could crush the docking arms of Kevel Prime. He swallowed hard. We will prepare to receive you. Excellent, Ward said with a smile that somehow felt like a promise and a warning at the same time. The transmission ended. Ikor stared at the image of the Resolute on the viewscreen. Every instinct told him this was no ordinary diplomatic mission. The humans had not just arrived. They had arrived with power the Council had never dreamed of. And in the pit of his stomach, he knew whatever happened next would change the galaxy forever. The docking clamps of Kevel Prime shuddered as the human shuttle approached. Ikor stood at the airlock, his uniform straightened, his crest pressed flat in an effort to look calm. He told himself it was just a meeting, an exchange of greetings, perhaps some formalities. But deep down, his claws dug into his palms. Through the thick glass of the observation port, he saw the shuttle glide into position. Even this small craft was enormous, its hull a smooth silver gray that caught the station lights like liquid metal. It didn't have the sharp, bristling weapon arrays of Council ships, but Ikor didn't doubt for a moment that it was dangerous. The docking seals locked in place with a heavy thud. A hiss of pressure equalization filled the corridor. Ikor's eyes flicked to the guards at his side. 3 of the station's best security officers. Their hands were steady on their sidearms, but he could smell their unease. The airlock doors slid open. 3 humans stepped through first. 2 wore the same plain dark uniforms as the man from the transmission. The third wore a lighter outfit, with a small case slung at her side. Behind them came Captain Elias Ward himself, taller than the others, his gaze sweeping over the corridor in a slow, measured way. Watchmaster Ikor, Ward said, extending his hand in a human greeting. An honor to meet you in person. Ikor hesitated for a heartbeat before clasping the human's hand. The grip was firm but not crushing. The warmth of the human's skin was surprising, almost like holding a heated metal plate. Welcome to Kevel Prime, Captain, Ikor said. We hope your journey was uneventful. Ward smiled faintly. Let's say it was interesting, but we made it here, and that's what matters. They began walking down the main corridor toward the central hall. The humans moved with a kind of quiet confidence, alert but not tense, as if they knew exactly where they were and what they wanted. Ikor caught the way they glanced at the walls, the control panels, the security cameras. They weren't just admiring the station's architecture. They were taking notes. The central hall was modest by Council standards, with banners of member species hanging from the high ceiling and a clear view of the observation deck beyond. Through the wide viewport, the Resolute floated in space like a dark mountain, its smaller escorts slowly orbiting. The sight still made Ikor's throat tighten. One of the humans, the woman with the case, stepped forward and began unpacking small objects onto the table. Cultural gifts, she explained in perfect Council standard. Examples of human art, literature, and music. We thought it might be a good way to begin. The items were simple enough. Small carved figures, thin-bound books, sleek metal devices that hummed softly when touched. But there was something in their design that drew the eye. They looked purposeful, as if every line had a hidden meaning. Ikor gestured for refreshments to be brought in. As they sat, he studied Captain Ward. The man's smile was polite, but his eyes never stopped moving, taking in every detail. You've learned our language well, Ikor said. I didn't realize humans had access to our linguistic databases. Ward set his cup down gently. We don't, he said. We learned from what you broadcast openly. Public records, cultural archives, open diplomatic channels. Nothing private. We wanted to be sure our first words to you would be understood. That admission unsettled Ikor. If the humans could learn this much from scraps of public data, what else might they be capable of? A soft chime interrupted them. Ikor touched his earpiece, and a voice from the control deck spoke quickly in his native tongue. His crest stiffened. "What is it?" Ward asked, noticing the change. "The Council fleet," Ikor replied carefully. "They are arriving earlier than expected." Ward turned toward the viewport. Outside, dozens of sleek Council warships slid into view, forming a spiraling pattern around the Resolute. Their hulls gleamed in the starlight, weapons at the ready. "A beautiful display," Ward said, his tone light. "An honor guard, I assume?" Ikor didn't answer immediately. To his eyes, it was no honor guard. It was a cage. The comm officer's voice echoed through the hall. "Admiral Cyril on secure channel. She requests immediate audience with Captain Ward." Ward rose smoothly. "Of course. Lead the way." Minutes later, they stood in the conference chamber, the Admiral's image projected in front of them. She was tall, silver-skinned, with sharp, commanding features. "Captain Ward," she said without preamble, "your vessel matches the size and mass of a deep-system dreadnought. Carries enough energy to shatter moons. Explain why you have entered our space in such a ship." Ward's reply was calm. "We come in peace. But the region of space we come from is not peaceful. Our ships must be able to defend themselves against threats your council has not yet faced." "What threats?" the Admiral pressed. Ward's eyes darkened slightly. "Things that would make those warships outside look like children's toys." Silence hung in the chamber. Ikor's tail twitched as he glanced at the Admiral, who seemed to be weighing every word. "And the other ships now arriving?" she asked at last. Ward's expression did not change. "They are part of our diplomatic fleet. Scientific vessels, trade envoys, cultural transports. We brought enough to ensure this first meeting is complete." Korra's heart sank. If those other vessels were even half the size of the Resolute, the balance of power in this region had just shifted forever. "Captain Ward," the Admiral said finally, "we will continue these talks, but understand, every move you make will be watched closely." Ward inclined his head politely. "I wouldn't have it any other way." As the transmission faded, Ikor looked out at the Resolute. In the black glass of its hull, he saw the faint reflections of the Council fleet's weapons targeting it. And he realized, with an uneasy chill, that if the humans wanted to, none of those weapons would matter. The human shuttle left the docking arm slowly, its engines glowing faintly as it drifted back toward the massive shape of the Resolute. Ikor stood at the observation deck, watching its every move. He could still feel the weight of Captain Ward's presence in the air, like the lingering scent of a predator after it's gone. The Council fleet still circled outside, holding their tight formation. From here, it almost looked like a ceremonial display, but Ikor knew better. Every ship had its weapons trained on the Resolute, and still the humans moved as if they hadn't noticed or simply didn't care. A quiet tone sounded from the console beside him. The sensor officer's voice was sharp. "Watchmaster, the Resolute just opened 3 more shuttle bays. Additional craft are launching." Korra's claws tapped against the glass. "Identify them. They match heavy transport configurations, but they're larger than anything in our fleet." He narrowed his eyes as the first of the new shuttles drifted free. Its hull gleamed with the same light-drinking metal as the mothership. It moved with deliberate precision, joining the others in a slow, sweeping pattern around the station. It wasn't threatening, not openly, but the message was clear. The humans were showing how easily they could surround Keval Prime if they chose. The comms officer turned toward him. "Another hail from the Resolute. Captain Ward requests permission for a formal tour of the station tomorrow. He says his delegation would like to meet our science staff and exchange technology samples." Ikor hesitated. The Council's standard protocol for first contact involved strict limits on access, especially with unknown species. But this wasn't a standard situation. If they refused, it could look hostile. If they agreed, they risked revealing more than they wanted. "Approve the tour," Ikor said finally, "but restrict them to pre-cleared areas." Double the guard detail. Yes, sir. That night, the station didn't sleep. Engineers checked every system twice. Security teams patrolled every hallway. Even the hydroponics gardens, usually filled with quiet workers tending alien plants, had armed officers nearby. The sense of unease spread through the crew like a cold wind. When morning came, the humans arrived. The new shuttle that brought them was even larger than the first, its matte black hull etched with faint patterns that seemed to shift under the light. When the docking clamps secured it, the sound echoed through the entire bay. Ikor was there to greet them again, flanked by a full honor guard. Captain Ward stepped out first. His uniform was simple, but the way he carried himself made the narrow docking bay feel smaller. Behind him came 4 others, 2 in uniforms with different insignias, 1 in a lighter outfit with what looked like medical equipment, and 1 in a sleek black suit that almost blended into the shadows. Ward greeted Ikor with that same calm smile. "We appreciate your hospitality. I hope this visit will help our peoples understand one another better." Ikor gestured toward the corridor. "This way." They began the tour in the public science wing. Tall windows showed the central garden dome, filled with green, blue, and crimson plants from 17 member species. Alien scientists and technicians moved between the labs, glancing curiously at the humans as they passed. One of the human delegates asked questions about the Council's agricultural technology, showing genuine interest in the alien crops. Another paused at a display of mineral samples, running her fingers lightly over the glass before jotting notes into a small device. The humans were polite, friendly, and engaged. Yet Ikor couldn't shake the feeling that every glance, every question, was collecting more information than it appeared. They weren't just here to learn about plants. They were studying the station's layout, its equipment, its people. In the engineering sector, things became more tense. A low hum filled the air from the station's main reactor. Council engineers worked at control panels, adjusting power flows and checking readouts. The humans looked around with quiet interest, their eyes lingering on the reactor's protective shields. One of Ikor's officers whispered to him, "Sir, they're scanning the systems. Passive scans, but they're mapping our power grid." Ikor's tail twitched. He said nothing, but his mind was racing. Finally, the tour ended in the observation lounge, where the Resolute filled half the view. From here, the sheer size of the human ship was even more overwhelming. It wasn't just big. It was a presence, a shadow across the stars. Ward stood beside Ikor, looking out at his ship. "She's beautiful, isn't she?" he said quietly. Ikor forced a polite smile. "Impressive, certainly. I imagine she's very capable." Ward glanced at him, his eyes steady. "Capable enough to survive what waits in our part of the galaxy. That's why we build them this way." There was a weight in his words, something that made Ikor's scales prickle. The comm panel on the wall chimed. A young officer rushed in, breathless. "Watchmaster, new arrivals. Large ships, coming out of folded space, 15 so far, all matching the Resolute's profile." Ward didn't turn from the window. "Ah, the rest of our delegation has arrived." Outside, massive shapes slid into normal space one by one, each as dark and imposing as the first. They took up positions in a loose formation around the Resolute, their escorts weaving between them like an armada settling into place. The lounge fell silent. Every alien in the room could see it now. This wasn't just a single ship visiting for peaceful talks. This was a fleet that could change the fate of the Council in a single day. Ikor realized his claws were digging into the railing. Whatever the humans truly wanted, the galaxy would never be the same after this. The arrival of the other human ships spread across the station like a shockwave. Every corridor was filled with murmurs, every console buzzing with updates. From the observation deck, Ikor watched as the newcomers settled into formation. They moved with a precision that only came from years, maybe centuries, of training. No wasted motion, no hesitation. The Council fleet still held its circle, but now their formation looked fragile. Their sleek ships were dwarfed by the massive black silhouettes surrounding the Resolute. The humans had not raised a single weapon, yet the balance of power in that patch of space had already shifted. Chorus comms officer approached quickly. Watchmaster Admiral Cyril requests an emergency meeting. She says it's urgent. Minutes later, Ikor stood in the main conference room with Captain Ward at his side. The wall screen lit up to show the Admiral's face, her silver features drawn tight. Captain Ward, she began without pleasantries. Your ships are heavily armed. Our scans confirm weapon systems powerful enough to crack moons. Explain why a diplomatic mission requires such force. Ward's expression stayed calm. Because space is dangerous where we come from. If we travel without protection, we do not return. These ships are our lifeline. The Admiral's voice hardened. You've entered our space without disclosing your full fleet strength. That is not a peaceful gesture. We did not conceal anything, Ward replied evenly. You asked for our presence and we came. The rest of the fleet followed standard safety protocols. Our region's dangers require us to travel together. Ikor could tell the Admiral wasn't satisfied. What dangers? She pressed. Ward's eyes met hers through the screen. Things you have never faced. Predators older than your civilizations. Machine fleets that strip planets to dust. Entities that do not speak, only consume. For a moment no one spoke. The Admiral's aides exchanged glances, their expressions uneasy. Ward broke the silence. We are here to talk, to learn, to trade knowledge. We are not here to fight, but we will not arrive unprepared for what might come. Kor watched the Admiral weigh those words. Finally, she said, until the Council decides, you will remain under observation. Any movement outside this sector will be considered hostile. Ward inclined his head. Understood. We will stay right here. The screen went dark. The room felt smaller. Kor turned toward Ward. You know they are afraid of you. Ward's mouth curved slightly. Fear fades when people understand each other. That is why we are here. Later, walking back toward the docking bay, Ikor noticed the humans were still studying everything. The layout of the halls, the access points, the security patterns. They moved as if every step was calculated. It was not threatening exactly, but it was never careless. In the control deck, the tension was thick. Officers kept glancing between the readings on their panels and the massive shapes outside. The human ships were idle, their weapons cold, but their sheer size seemed to press down on the station. The sensor officer caught Ikor's attention. Sir, we've been able to penetrate part of their hull shielding. What did you find? Kor asked. The officer swallowed. Internal structures the size of cities. Power signatures stronger than our largest reactors. And manufacturing capacity. They could build more ships while traveling. Kor's frill flattened against his head. A fleet that could grow even as it moved. The council had nothing like it. Hours later, a formal dinner was arranged in the central hall. A cautious attempt at diplomacy. Long tables were laid with dishes from different council species. The air filled with scents both sweet and sharp. The humans arrived on time, wearing less formal clothing but still with that same quiet discipline. Ward made polite conversation with representatives from several worlds, speaking just enough to keep the mood from turning cold. He asked about council trade routes, cultural traditions, and scientific discoveries. He shared small details about human music and art. Yet Ikor noticed he never spoke about their military unless asked directly, and then his answers were short and without numbers. At one point, an ambassador from the Varine cluster leaned forward. Captain Ward, how many of these ships does your people possess? Ward set down his cup and looked at her calmly. Enough to protect what is ours. Enough to protect our allies. And if you have no allies here? She asked. Ward's gaze didn't waver. Then perhaps we will have to make some. The table fell silent at that, the weight of his words settling like a shadow. When the dinner ended, Ikor returned to the observation deck. Outside, the Resolute and its sister ships hung in space like sleeping beasts, their escorts drifting slowly between them. The council fleet remained in position, their lights small and pale by comparison. He knew the council leaders were meeting already, debating what to do. Some would call for the humans to be sent away. Others would argue for alliance. and some, perhaps the most dangerous, would think about how to take what the humans had. Igor stayed at the viewport a long time, watching the black shapes move in the starlight. He had the uneasy sense that history was shifting beneath his feet, and no one, not the council, not the humans, knew where it would lead. The council's high chamber was crowded, the air thick with unease. Igor sat near the edge of the long table, his eyes flicking between the delegates and the massive screen showing the human fleet outside. The ships looked like dark mountains drifting in space, silent but full of power. Every representative knew the truth now. This was no single diplomatic vessel, no small delegation. This was an arrival that could change everything. Captain Ward stood at the far end of the chamber, flanked by two of his officers. He seemed completely at ease, as if the stares of dozens of alien leaders meant nothing to him. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady. "We come from far beyond your maps," he said. "We traveled together for safety, not to intimidate. Where we live, the dangers are constant and vast. We bring our fleets because without them, we do not survive." The words might have sounded humble, but the images on the screen behind him told a different story. Each ship in his so-called diplomatic fleet was larger than the Council's biggest warship. And they had more than a dozen of them here already. A tall, thin ambassador from the Jareth systems leaned forward. "Captain Ward, exactly how many worlds does your people control?" Ward didn't hesitate. "Around 12,000 active colonies, and more in development." The room went still. Igor saw several delegates exchange sharp, startled glances. 12,000. That was more than 6 times the number of inhabited worlds in the entire Galactic Council. The Admiral's voice came through the chamber speakers from the fleet flagship. "That number is difficult to believe, Captain. Even for a species as long-lived as yours, such an empire would take many ages to build." Ward shook his head. "It is not an empire. Each world governs itself. We are united for mutual defense, trade, and exploration. That is all." An elder diplomat from the Cellari shifted in his seat. "And how many ships like the Resolute do you have?" "Many," Ward said simply. "Enough to cover all our colonies and patrol the spaces between. But our strength is not for conquest. It is for protection." Korra's tail twitched. He believed the captain was telling the truth, at least mostly. But even if the humans were not conquerors, the scale of what they carried with them was staggering. Another voice spoke from the far side of the chamber. It was Counselor Rivain, known for her cautious nature. "Protection from what, Captain? You have hinted at threats beyond our experience. Name them." Ward's expression darkened slightly. "There are machine fleets that harvest entire star systems, stripping every planet to rubble. There are creatures older than suns, moving through the void like hunters. There are storms in folded space that can tear a fleet apart in seconds. These are things we have fought for centuries. We learned early that weakness is an invitation to extinction." The silence that followed was heavy. Igor noticed some delegates shifting uncomfortably, while others leaned forward, fascinated. Ward continued, his tone softening. "We believe the Council is fortunate not to have faced such dangers, but the galaxy is vast, and threats move. If they come here, will you be ready?" The question hung in the air like a blade. No one wanted to answer it. Ward stepped back slightly, letting the weight of his words settle. "We are willing to share what we know, to work together, to trade technology, defense strategies, and culture. But to do that, we need a place here. A few worlds where our people can live and build." The word "few" was small, but everyone in the chamber understood that even a handful of human worlds could change the balance of power in the Council forever. One of the older generals of the Council Defense Force finally spoke. "And if we refuse you?" Ward met his gaze without blinking. "Then we will respect your decision and look elsewhere. But the offer of friendship will remain. So will the offer of protection." Before anyone could respond, an aide hurried into the chamber and whispered urgently to Igor. His crest stiffened at the words. He rose slowly. "Captain Ward, our sensors have detected something on long-range scans. A large object entering this sector's outer rim. Ward tilted his head slightly. Large. Larger than any vessel in our records, Ikor said. It appears artificial. And it is moving toward Council space. The room was suddenly alive with low, anxious voices. The Admiral's voice crackled again over the comms. How long until it reaches us? Perhaps a week, Ikor replied. But it is still accelerating. Ward's eyes narrowed, and for the first time since his arrival, Ikor saw a flicker of something behind the captain's calm recognition. I know what that is, Ward said quietly. And if I'm right, you will need more than your fleet to stop it. The chamber went still again. Ward's voice was calm, but there was no mistaking the warning in it. If the Council agrees, he said, we can intercept it before it reaches your worlds. But if you want our help, then our talks must move faster. The delegates exchanged uneasy glances. This was no longer just about diplomacy. The Council's survival might already depend on the humans they barely understood. Ikor looked at the captain and knew, deep in his bones, that the galaxy had just shifted again. The chamber emptied quickly after Captain Ward's warning, but the tension did not leave with the delegates. Ikor stayed behind with a few senior officers, watching the giant display that still showed the human fleet outside. The Resolute and its sister ships drifted in perfect formation, silent but watching, as if they too were waiting for the Council's answer. The long-range scans had been confirmed. The object was real. It was huge, bigger than anything the Council had seen before, moving through the void with steady, deliberate speed. Its energy signature was unlike any known ship or station. Ikor's comms officer came in quietly. The object will reach our border in 6 days. It is accelerating. 6 days. The Council had taken years to debate lesser threats. Now they had to decide everything, whether to trust the humans, whether to let them fight alongside them almost immediately. Captain Ward entered the chamber again, as calm as before. I spoke with my fleet. We can intercept it, he said. But we will need to move within the next 40 hours to catch it at a safe distance from your core worlds. Ikor studied him. What exactly is it, Captain? Ward's eyes were steady. It's called a harvester, a machine construct built to consume planetary resources. Once it locks onto a target system, it strips it bare, atmosphere, oceans, crust, until nothing remains but a dead rock. We've destroyed them before, but never without a fight. And if we do nothing? Ikor asked. Then one of your frontier worlds will vanish, Ward said simply. And it won't stop there. The words sent a chill through Ikor's frill. You speak as if you are certain. Ward gave a small nod. Because I am. These things don't negotiate. They don't retreat. They only stop when they are destroyed. The Admiral's voice came through the chamber speakers, firm but tense. Captain Ward, are you proposing a joint operation? Yes, Ward replied. My fleet will lead the engagement. Your forces can observe, learn our tactics, and assist where possible. But understand this, if you want to keep your people safe, we must hit it before it reaches inhabited space. There was a long pause. The Admiral's voice returned, quieter. And what do you want in return? Ward did not hesitate. A formal defense agreement. The right to establish up to 50 human colonies in Council space, embassy worlds, not military bases. In exchange, those colonies will protect the systems around them as if they were our own. Ikor could hear the murmur of the Admiral's aides in the background, voices rising in argument. You ask for much, she said at last. I offer more, Ward replied. This will not be the last threat you face. With us here, you will never face them alone. The Admiral's answer was short. We will call an emergency vote. The channel closed. Ikor turned to Ward. You knew about this thing before you came here, didn't you? Ward's mouth curved slightly, but his eyes gave nothing away. We suspected something might come. We didn't expect it this soon. Outside the viewport, the black shapes of the human ships seemed even more imposing. Ikor knew that within them were weapons and systems the Council barely understood, and crews trained for wars the Council had never imagined. 2 hours later, the Council vote was complete. The decision was narrow, but it was a yes. The humans were granted temporary defense rights and permission to act against the approaching machine. The colony agreement would be discussed after the battle. When Ward received the news, he didn't celebrate. He simply tapped his comm and gave the order. Across the void, the human fleet shifted. Massive engines flared to life, their glow lighting the edges of the station's windows. One by one, the ships turned toward the darkness where the harvester was coming from. Kor watched them go. Even at a distance, the scale of their movement was unsettling. Each ship looked like a drifting fortress, and now they moved with a predator's certainty toward their prey. Before Ward left, he spoke quietly to Kor. "When you see what happens out there, you'll understand why we came with so many ships." Kor said nothing, but the truth sat heavy in his chest. He had believed the Council's fleets were strong, that their defenses were more than enough to protect their space. Now, watching the humans depart, he was no longer sure. In the silence that followed, the station's sensors kept tracking the human fleet as it pushed into the outer dark. Beyond them, far past any safe patrol route, the harvester was still coming, its outline faint but growing. It didn't know or didn't care that a fight was waiting for it. And for the first time since the alarms had sounded, Kor felt something strange. Not hope, not exactly, but a sense that the humans might actually win. The harvester appeared on the long-range scopes as a faint shape at first, a dim blot in the black. But as the human fleet closed in, it grew and the details became clear. It was no simple machine. Its body was the size of a small moon, a shifting web of black metal and glowing seams, its surface constantly moving as if alive. Great spines unfolded from its sides, each the length of a city, and strange lights pulsed along its hull in patterns that made Kor's eyes ache. From the observation deck of Kevel Prime, Kor watched the battle through a live feed relayed from human ships. The Resolute led the formation, its flanking vessels spreading wide to encircle the harvester. The human captains didn't waste time with warnings or speeches. Their weapons came online in silence, the glow of their systems lighting the darkness. The first volley hit like a sunflower. Beams of pure energy, thick as rivers, lanced across the void and slammed into the harvester's armor. The metal rippled and warped under the impact, but the thing didn't slow. Instead, it answered. A beam of its own, wide and white-hot, cut through the dark and struck one of the smaller human escorts. The shields flared, then collapsed, and the ship spun away trailing molten fragments. It didn't explode. It simply steadied itself, repaired systems already kicking in, and fell back into position. Kor had never seen a ship take that kind of hit and survive. Ward's voice came through the feed, calm and controlled. Phase 2. Close the ring. The human ships tightened their formation, weaving between bursts of the harvester's counterfire. They moved like predators in perfect coordination, every shot measured, every maneuver deliberate. Then Kor saw something that made him lean closer. From the Resolute's belly, enormous panels unfolded, each one glowing with contained energy. At the edges of the formation, other ships mirrored the action, forming a loose sphere around the harvester. The light grew brighter until the feed's cameras automatically dimmed. The harvester's spines shifted as if it sensed what was coming. Ward gave the order. Fire the net. What came next was unlike anything Kor had imagined. It wasn't a single shot, but thousands, thin beams connecting ship to ship, crisscrossing through space until the harvester was caught in a cage of burning light. The web tightened, collapsing toward the center. Wherever the beams touched the harvester's armor, chunks of black metal tore away, vaporizing into glowing dust. The machine tried to break free, lashing out with beams and pulses, but every strike was met by layers of overlapping shields. The humans were losing ships. 2 escorts went dark, another broke apart completely, but the net kept closing. Finally, with a soundless flash that made even the feed shudder, the web snapped shut. The harvester's entire body flared white, then shattered into a cloud of fragments, each one burning as it tumbled into the dark. In seconds, nothing remained but drifting debris. The feed zoomed out, showing the human fleet reforming. Damaged ships were already receiving repair drones. The Resolute glided forward, its hull still dark and unbroken, as if it had barely been touched. On Keval Prime, the control deck erupted with voices. Some cheered, some spoke in disbelief, and others simply stared at the screen in silence. Kor felt the same strange mix of awe and unease. The Council Admiral's voice came through the comms, formal but carrying something that almost sounded like relief. "Captain Ward, the Galactic Council thanks you. Without your fleet, that thing would have reached our worlds." Ward's reply was steady. "That's why we came, and that's why we need to stand together." Later, in the docking bay, Kor met Ward as he returned. The human captain looked exactly as he had before the battle, calm, composed, his uniform spotless. "You destroyed it," Kor said. Ward shook his head slightly. "We stopped one. There are more out there." The words settled heavily in Kor's mind. If this was just one, what else waited beyond the edge of known space? Within a week, the Council signed the full alliance. The humans were granted their embassy worlds, and joint patrols began almost immediately. Where once the Council fleet had seemed the pinnacle of strength, now it sailed alongside ships that made it feel small, but instead of fear, there was a growing sense of safety. Months passed, and Kor saw the changes. Human engineers worked beside Council scientists, teaching them new shield designs. Council traders ventured into human-settled sectors and returned with goods they had never dreamed of. Young cadets from both sides trained together, learning each other's tactics. One evening, Kor stood again at the observation deck. Out beyond the station, a mixed formation of human and Council ships moved together in perfect rhythm. They didn't look like rivals now. They looked like something new. Ward joined him quietly. "You've adjusted well," the captain said. Kor allowed himself a small smile. "I had to. The galaxy is bigger than I thought it was. And more dangerous." Ward's gaze stayed on the ships. "It's also more worth protecting than you think." They stood in silence for a while, watching the joint fleet disappear into folded space. Kor felt the truth of Ward's words. The galaxy had changed the day the Resolute arrived, and it would never go back to what it was before. But maybe that wasn't a bad thing. In the end, they had not invited conquerors into their space. They had welcomed defenders, dangerous ones, yes, but defenders all the same. And now, if another shadow ever rose out of the dark, it would face not just one civilization, but two. And Kor knew, with a certainty that made his crest rise, that such an enemy would regret it.